Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Tina Baxter to discuss career transition to entrepreneur. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Tina, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Great. Well, I'm Tina Baxter. As you said, I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been in healthcare for over 25 years. I'm a legal nurse consultant. That means I help attorneys with their medical cases. And I am a nurse business coach, and I help nurses and others in the healthcare to open up their own businesses.
Now, I have a lot of respect for nurses. As I told you, I spent about a month in the hospital and after stomach surgery, and I learned to respect the trade. And then trade's not the right word, occupation. And then I worked for about 4 years at nursing homes. So I have a lot of respect, as I said, for what you do. And I will nevertheless ask you mean and nasty questions because I have to treat everybody. When you're helping someone transition from nursing, and I always remember a great line from the television series MASH, that nurse is not only a noun, but also a verb.
Yes.
When you are helping someone transition from being a nurse to becoming an entrepreneur, what are the skills that you emphasize that will help them on their entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I'm going to say this. First of all, I'm glad you asked that question because I always tell my nurses and others in the healthcare field, you don't have to leave your profession, but you may have to leave your job. And as nurses, we're taught the art of assessment, putting together a plan of care, getting stuff done. Sometimes when there's not a lot of resources. So we have a lot of skills that we can pull from as a nurse. So I say, God wastes nothing, and take those nursing skills and turn it into your business. And I'll give you a really quick example.
Please.
Years ago, I was a radio DJ, and not a lot of people know that. So I had a radio show in high school and college, and I got trained, have my FCC license, the whole nine, right? And I never really used those skills until very recently. And a couple years ago, I started my own podcast. And when I did that, it just dawned on me that all those skills that I learned about broadcasting and how to run a program and do all those things, I was able to bring that to the table when I started my nursing podcast. And that's what I tell our nurses. Take what you have in your hand, those skills that you've learned. Let me show you how you can translate that into the business realm. We're taught very well on how to manage a team. We're taught very well at nursing on how to work with others. So let's use those skills then and bring it to the marketplace. And that's what I do.
At nursing homes, and I'm sure it's the same in hospitals, in any healthcare facility. I know that, and just for the record, I was the director of development. I was responsible for fundraising and marketing and media relations, public relations, etc. Nothing, of course, of medical nature, but I had to know stuff. And there were some rules about hiring nurses.
Yes.
or about the way nurses could dress. For example, no long fingernails, no dangling earrings or dangling earrings. Yeah, dangling
Hmm.
earrings, sharp rings, basically no engagement rings, just a wedding band. And what am I forgetting? Hair had to be back, no necklaces, nothing that a resident without any intent of malice could grab a hold of and hurt themselves or the nurse. There was only one time that and I say this facetiously, felt that my life was in danger. And that was when I got a grant for the nurses to learn how to use the new computer system so that they could file for Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements,
Hmm.
which was the law. And as you know, no doubt most of our viewers know, there is a big difference between what the government will pay for someone who is suffering from dementia or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. So you have to know how to enter that data.
Yes.
And the nurses came to me and said they were going to kill me because they did not get into nursing to be computer data entry people. They
Yes.
wanted to be with the patients. Now, obviously, if you become an entrepreneur, your patient, in air quotes, is your client.
Yes.
And you'll be with them, but they're the client, and therefore they're the boss, and therefore they're the source of your aggravation. It's no longer, if you'll pardon the expression, the head nurse or the head physician or the administrator. It's now the client. So I'm surprised, and I don't know why, that nurses would, well, let me put it this way. Is the transition for nurses to entrepreneurship relatively difficult because it's more of the data entry side of a position than the hands-on care?
I would have to say that one, maybe traditionally, because I remember when electronic medical records came, and it was a transition. But nurses now are able to navigate that, and nurses are on TikTok and everything else now. So
Yeah.
you have a new generation of nurses that the technology piece isn't as daunting. But here's the thing: when you speak about patients or the customer, the client becoming the boss, it's really not necessarily that case because nurses are good at taking care of our patients and meeting the needs of our patients. And so you translate that to meeting the needs of your clients. What nurses struggle with is now being the boss, now being the CEO, now understanding that the buck stops with you. And if you don't go to work, work doesn't happen. If you don't show up in your business, nothing's going to happen with your business. And it's those types of things. It's now you have to know the systems to put in place to make your business run and grow, and learning those business principles. That's what nurses sometimes struggle with. And so making that transition from, hey, I work my shift, I get to go home, to now I may not stop at the end of my shift when the business closed. Guess what? There's still stuff to do. You have to do the day, the billing for the day. You have to submit your invoices. You have to do your accounting. You may have to be the janitor if you don't have anybody hired to do that for you. And so that's a big transition for a lot of people, nurses, but also others that are entering business, because you're used to having that PTO time and that vacation time to fall back on. And what happens when you get sick? Who's going to do the work? And so those are some of the questions that we help you walk you through, those practical things and changing your mindset so that you're prepared for when those things happen. You'll have a plan in place to address them.
One of the reasons why I respect nurses so much is because of the stress that they are constantly under. And I don't have to tell you, and I don't want to make it a topic for the podcast. I've got horrible stories, and I'm sure you've got even worse ones. Now, if someone is going from the stress of a nurse to being an entrepreneur, it's safe to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that what they're choosing as their entrepreneurial endeavor is something that they're passionate about, that they enjoy, and that brings them a release from the stress of nursing.
I would hope so.
Okay, so
Mhm.
my question is this. If their release endeavor is now their job, and by definition, that means it's going to cause them stress because it's different, they'll be able to compare it to the stress of nursing and it won't stand up to that level. But what do they have to fall back on in order to relieve their stress if their stress reliever is now the cause of their stress?
Well, I'm gonna say, first of all, there's 2 different kinds of stresses. So there's that stress that comes with burnout, right? That we are seeing as this phenomenon that's happening across the healthcare spectrum and in other industries.
Mhm.
But there's that stress. But then there's that one of the things that we do in our first consultation appointments is we talk about why you want to be an entrepreneur and what is it that you're looking for. And so that's different for everyone. And so some people come with the idea of, oh, I saw this business and this person's doing really well in it, and I think this would be a good idea for me. And so they may choose the wrong business to go into. And I'll give you a great example. I researched a lice removal business. Now, I heard about this. I heard
Lice,
about a removing head lice.
Lice.
Yes, removing head lice. Yeah, and it was a great business. I researched it. We only had 2 entities in the state of Indiana that provided the service. They had a great business model. The nurse that was doing it was doing very well, lucrative. I did all the research about this franchise. And then I sat down and I thought about it. I don't like head lice. I don't even thinking about it gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
So even though that could be a great viable business for me, it was not the right business or fit for me. And so oftentimes, and I can't remember who said it, but the saying is that when you do something that you love, it's never really work.
Mhm.
And I think finding that passion, what makes your heart sing, helps you when, yeah, you're going to have some time when it's not going to be as fun and maybe something happens, but then you remember why you're doing what you're doing. And the second part of your question is, how do you handle those stress? Well, if you haven't learned how to take care of yourself as a nurse, how are you going to take care of yourself as a business owner and entrepreneur? So we talk a lot about your self-care and developing that plan and putting those things in place for, okay, you want to take a vacation, let's plan for that vacation. You want to have some time off, go get your nails done, go shopping with your friends, plan a date night out with your spouse. Do something that's for you that's not business related. And so we talk about putting those practices in place so when those things happen, you're able to withstand. And that's all about resiliency. And so we train and teach on those things as well.
Well, head lice removal is nothing of which to be ashamed. It's an honorable
Mhm.
profession. I, of course, have a very simple and cost-effective solution, which you can see.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure the joke
Mhm.
took. If
Yes.
it doesn't take, it's bad. Forget I think it was Johnny Carson said, there's no place lonelier. And it's happened to me, and he was right. Standing on a stage, making a joke, and getting nothing. Just blank stares. It is very, very lonely up there. But anyways, you are listed, and I have to read this because I'll get it wrong, as an alignable local business person of the year for 22 and 23. I don't know what that means, but I will congratulate you sincerely
Mhm.
on having obtained that. What is an alignable local business?
So Alignable is an online platform
Mhm.
and that's geared towards small businesses. And we get together so that you can meet with businesses in your local community and network. And that's kind of how it started. And I'm happy to say I'm also the 2024 local alignable business winner as well for my small little town of Anderson, right? My little city, Anderson. Um, and so what they've done is across the country and in Canada, they have these contests, which is kind of more pushing you out to meet new people and to talk to people. And so, you have to get, there's a vote. It's kind of like American Idol. You get votes and things like that. People give testimonials about you and your business. And this is a way of promoting small business to get to know, like, and trust one another and work together. And so in the local community, as an ambassador, I gather together our local business people and we have um, different events. We meet ups just so we can, learn how to work with one another. So it's kind of like I kind of call it the in between Facebook and LinkedIn, where LinkedIn is just a little bit more rigid and stuffy. They're like and then Facebook is like the wild, wild west, right? So you have the social platform where you can get together and meet people and learn about what they do and how you can refer business to one another. And it's been very helpful for me. I've been on the platform for several years now, and it's been great meeting some wonderful people. And this is how I meet some of my nurses. Is like, hey, tell me about what you're doing, and I'll tell you about what I'm doing. And then, sure, if something comes out of it, and we refer business, fine. But if not, I've met a new person and maybe a potentially new friend, and that's good.
Now, one of the things that I have had to deal with are people saying that in various professions, especially IT,
Mhm,
that they're, I don't want to use the word prejudice. Well, yeah, I can use the word prejudice against women and minorities. Now, that's based on a report that was written regarding the largest IT companies, which were also the first IT companies. And in
mhm.
those days, there were only white men who were involved with IT. So there's no shock or surprise in the fact that there are fewer, they exist, but fewer women and minorities than white men. It's just simple math.
Yes, in those fields, yes.
Now, in nursing, it's kind of the reverse. Most nurses are women,
Yes.
and based on my experience in the nursing homes, a good proportion, even the majority, it's been a couple years, and it's been a couple decades, but are minorities. Is that still the case? Because you already pointed out that
Yes.
I'm old and that I didn't realize that nurses are now trained in what they didn't want to be trained in 20 years ago. Thank you very
Yes.
much, by the
Yes,
way.
out of necessity. I remember working in the hospital, and we had doctors and nurses quit when electronic medical records came in. So, yeah, I remember those days. But to your
I
point,
had to do an HR newsletter. I wrote the
mhm,
HR newsletter, and I had to give a summary of HIPAA.
mhm,
Everybody knows what HIPAA is.
yes,
But in those days, nobody knew what HIPAA was. It was
right,
brand new.
yep,
So
mhm,
I wrote it. I showed it to my boss. She showed it to her boss. We showed it to the VP of Medical Services, a physician, the VP of Nursing, obviously a nurse.
mhm.
Everybody saw it, everybody approved it, and everybody missed my typo. Instead of HIPAA, I wrote hippo. And they came back and they said, okay, we're all to blame for it, but it's kind of right. You weren't so far off. But go ahead, I interrupted you. I
Yes,
apologize.
no, I was just gonna say, well, maybe they mistook it for the Hippocratic oath.
No, they didn't. Nice try, but there was If anything, it was a Freudian slip that everybody fell over.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, that when we talk about nursing, yes, nursing has traditionally been a female profession. And though your experience may be more minorities in nursing, I bet a lot of the people that you're talking about were actually certified nursing assistants.
No.
And maybe they were like maybe LPNs. And so a lot of times, historically, nursing was cut off for people of color. If we go all the way back to Florence Nightingale,
Mhm.
Mary Seacole, a nurse from Jamaica, actually went to work with Florence Nightingale to learn about what she was doing, but because of the cultural differences of the time, that relationship wasn't as positive as we would like it to be. So Mary Seacole did her own thing, and so it wasn't until years later that that nurses were allowed to nurses of color were allowed to become nurses, and so you have to go back to that history in the United States. In the United States. And so I say that to say that nursing overwhelmingly was a female profession because a lot of it started in the monasteries and then the Catholic Church with nuns and priests, monks.
Mhm.
So let's fast forward then to today. We're still a female, overly female profession, but now we're seeing more males come into nursing and it's grown even more. And the interesting fact of the matter is that even just now they just published a survey that says even though there are more females in nursing, males in nursing still make more money than females in nursing because we have that gender gap. And it's partially because nursing was in the middle ages towards the 19th century, nursing became what they call women's work, right? And so this is where they're saying that now, uh, because you're in the hospitals, this is all, and I'm just doing this research, by the way. So in the hospitals, when the hospitals were attached to the nursing training programs, the nurses lived there. They had strict moral guidelines that they had to follow. You talked about the not, having the long nails and the earrings and things like that. We do it for modern times for infection control, but a lot of that stuff back then were, you had to have good moral standing, and that's still in the, by the way, good moral standing to be a nurse. And so there were how you interpret that. So that's where some of those changes are coming about. I'm excited to see more men enter the profession. I'm so excited to see more minorities entering the profession. Um, and there's a really great push now for diversity, which is very positive. I can see. Um, there's a lot that goes into the healthcare profession. There's right now with the shortage, as they call it, the nursing shortage. We're importing nurses from other countries. Fortunately, though, that leaves those other countries without nurses to care for their people. So there's a big backlash against that type of thing that's happening. So there's a lot that goes into what you see in healthcare, and it really depends on what region you live in, what city you're from, what state you're from, about the proportions of ethnic background and things like that. But there's here in Indiana, there's a very large Filipino nurse presence, which is cool.
Well, 20 years ago, Greater New York, there was a dearth of nurses. And if a nurse with no experience had graduated, passed all of her exams, was licensed to practice, I don't mean she was an LPN, I mean
Hmm.
licensed to practice, and she stayed on the job for 6 months, she'd get a $5,000 signing bonus, which just infuriated everybody.
Hmm.
Not that we resented the fact that they were given a $5,000 signing bonus, but that it was so difficult to find nurses that you had to give somebody with no experience 5 grand to stay on the job for 6 months.
Yeah.
But you mentioned CNAs,
Hmm.
and I wrote in our, I think it was quarterly newsletter, a big article on our CNA program. And I was very impressed with the CNAs because they have the worst job of
Yes.
anyone in the hospital, period, nothing to debate. And I wrote the article, and the director of the CNAs, who was a nurse, read it, said it was great. The VP of nursing said it was great. The VP of medical services liked it. The administrator hated it. And
Hmm.
I wasn't obligated to go and show the article to anybody, and I didn't show it to him. And he
Hmm.
said, "Why did you write about the CNAs?" And I said, "Well, nobody knows what they do." Now, with delicacy,
Hmm.
if you can explain, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know what a CNA does, what CNAs do, and how would you advise them to become entrepreneurs?
That's a good question. And so, what CNA? Because I train CNAs as part of my background. So there you go. And I was a CNA, so I'd like to point that out as well. Certified nursing assistants or nursing assistants, they are what we like to call the eyes and ears of nursing because they're the ones that have particularly in long-term care, have the most time with your resident. So they're the ones that are helping the resident get up for the day with their activities of daily living, like getting dressed and bathing, feeding. They're the ones that are going to see their skin and alert the nurse to say, "Hey, someone's got a red bottom. Someone's got a sore on their toe." They're going to see those things. They're responsible for turning. They're responsible for helping them to walk and maybe help the rehab staff. So they're responsible for a lot, and my hat's off to CNAs because I think they are the most underpaid resource that we have in
Underappreciated.
healthcare. They're very underappreciated. And they're also the ones that kind of get a lot of the abuse from residents that may have dementia or memory problems, but also from family members, you know, because, maybe they're mad because they didn't move fast enough or they didn't understand it. That, yes, they were just in there 5 seconds ago, but your family member has dementia. So, no, they're not going to remember that. And so I've been on the both ends of the spectrum with related to healthcare, and so I think that if you can pay someone $15 an hour to flip a burger, you better pay them $15 an hour to flip your grandma, and that's my opinion on that.
I like to tell the story because I had to explain abuse. As a
Mhm.
fundraiser, well, there are accusations of abuse. And I said, well, everyone at the nursing home, myself included, even though I will never come into physical contact with a resident, had to learn how to do certain things.
Mhm.
And one of the things was how you move a resident from the bed to the chair.
Mhm.
And you can have a resident who almost literally you can just hold a flashlight to their back, turn it on, and have a look see. You don't have to take an x-ray because they're so thin and frail. And if you pick them up properly, just the weight of their body on your thumbs will cause a bruise. They weren't abused.
Mhm.
So yeah, I know of what you speak, and like I said, and I'm glad we can almost end on this because I did want to make sure that we gave CNAs the recognition that they deserved. Now, I'm going to put up your contact information, and I have one final question for you. I'll make us magically appear. Is there anything that I did not ask you, which you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
Well, one of the questions I frequently get is what type of businesses do nurses and nurse practitioners and nursing assistants, what do they look for? Because a lot of people are like, well, what can you do? And I want to say literally anything. I have nurses that open up home care agencies. Some run staffing agencies. I had a massage therapist who was opening up a massage therapy school. I've had nurses that are doing CPR training. It could be anything. I know of a CNA that owns her own home care. and is working towards, she's got the people in place to help run it, and she's working on getting her RN degree. So there you can do just about anything. I know nurses that are authors, writers, podcast hosts, a variety of different things. So I say dream big, and don't just let the naysayers dissuade you. Find what it is that you're passionate about and look to do more of it.
Tina, I want to thank you profusely. I've enjoyed this immensely. I commend you on what you are doing. And on behalf of myself and our viewers, I thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.